In regards to the Simcha of Chag Sukkos, we find that in addition to the general obligation of Simcha, which exists because of the fact that it's Yom Tov, so any Yom Tov has the idea of Simcha, especially Sukkos, which is called Zman Simchaseinu. But in addition to this, there are Simchos which are connected with particular things that we do on Sukkos. So number one, there's the Simcha that's connected with taking the Daled Minim on this Yom Tov. The pasuk says, "Ulekachtem lachem b'yom harishon," and it goes through the four different things that we take along with the lulav, etc. And it says, "Usmachtem lefnei Hashem elekeichem shivas yamim." You should rejoice in front of Hashem for 7 days. So this is the simcha associated with lulav. There's also the simcha that's connected with nisuch hamayim, with the pouring of water that would happen on Sukkos, and the drawing of the water, which you would later pour on Sukkos on the Mizbeach. So it was drawn the night before. It had to be poured, and that was done b'simcha. As it says, Usha'afta mayim b'sasoin mimayne hayeshua. This is the famous simcha of Simchas Beis HaShayeva. Now, which one of these two came first? The order of these two simchas is really connected and is dependent on a machloikus of Tanoim of when it is that Nisuch HaMayim actually started. There's one opinion that Nisuch HaMayim started the second day of Sukkos, in the morning. And based on that, the drawing of the water for the first time would have been the night before that, which is the second night of Sukkos, which is already after the time the Daled Minim would have been taken on the first day of Sukkos. But the halacha is in fact like the second opinion, that Nisuch HaMayim happened all 7 days of Sukkos, which includes also the first day of Sukkos, and therefore drawing the water before that first pouring would have been the first night of Sukkos. So the Simchas Beis HaSheva started already on the first night of Sukkos, before taking the Daled Minim, which the mitzvah is of course by day, which would be the next morning. Now the Rebbe says we know that Torah tells us a general rule that Eilu va'Eilu divrei Elikim Chayim, which means that every opinion in Torah is really the word of Hashem. And therefore, both opinions have a room, have a part to play, Beruchnius, in the spiritual element, in the spiritual realm. Both opinions are true. Even the opinion that drawing of the water started on the second night of Yom Tov. Furthermore, even according to the halacha, that the drawing of water was, in fact, on the first night of Yom Tov as well, but the full, complete simcha of Simchas Beis HaShayeva, the extra simcha that took place, which was with musical instruments, with a cholil, with a flute, etc., started on Moitzoi, the first day. So because it's Yom Tov, the musical instruments only started on the second night of Sukkos. And even though the fact that it started on the second night of Sukkot seems to be just because of a side reason, the Rebbe uses an expression of the Gemara, Aryeh hu deravia ale, which literally means a lion is crouching there, which is an expression that means, in other words, it's because of some side thing that's preventing us to be able to have the proper simcha. It seems to be only a side point. The fact that the cholil, this flute, is not doiche, doesn't push away Shabbos or Yom Tov. And in fact, the Rebbe says, because of that reason, it's because of that therefore these days, when we have Simchas Beis HaShayeva, and there isn't necessarily all the particular halachis and rules of how Simchas Beis HaShayeva has to be done, so that you don't have to have necessarily this cholil, the flute. So the Rebbe says, Yesh loymar, we could say, as discussed a number of times, Kalkoloseinu zui takonoseinu, that the fact that we don't have Simchas Beis HaShayeva in the most perfect way, the fact that we were ruined in a certain way, ends up being fixing something or being to our benefit, which means that these days, Simchas Beis HaShayeva, we could start with the biggest shturim. In many ways, we could start with the biggest, greatest simcha, already the first night of Sukkos. But getting back to the original point, so even though the fact that he didn't have the extra simcha on the first night of Sukkot seems to be only because of this technical side reason that we can't have the music, nevertheless, says the Rebbe, the bottom line is, since we know that in Torah everything is precise, so it's understood that the fact that B'poil Mamish, the Simcha Yisayid in the Beis HaMikdash, did not start on the first night and it started only Moitzoi Yom Tov, so on the second night, we must say that is because that is also in accordance with and it fits with the teichen of the simcha, meaning to say that in truth, the Simcha Yisera, as it was in the Beis HaMikdash, could really only start on the second night of Yom Tov, on Motzei Yom Tov. Why should that be the case? Says the Rebbe, we're going to understand it by first explaining the pnimiyisdike connection of Nisuch HaMayim, of this idea of pouring the water, to Chag HaSukkos. So what are the differences between the Simcha that took place by Nisuch HaYayin? The Leviim sang Shira. The Gemara says, Ein oimrim Shira ela ala yayin. That Shira, singing, only comes along with wine, with the pouring of the wine. So there was a Simcha by Nisuch HaYayin, and then there's the special Simcha, which is associated with Nisuch HaMayim, the Simchas Beis HaSheyeva. So the Rebbe explains, the joy that exists by Nisuch HaYayin, by pouring wine, is connected with the nature of the person. In other words, it's a natural thing that wine is associated with Simcha. Just like we understand simply that there's a simcha that comes from wine, from drinking wine, and the reason for that is just because it's naturally, yayin is something that's mesameach. Wine brings joy. So the same thing is true with nisuch hayayin. That means, even though, of course, by nisuch hayayin, by the pouring of wine by the mizbeach, this is a holy simcha, it's connected with the avodah of the Beis HaMikdash. Nevertheless, we could say the simcha is still very much connected with the nature of the person. That wine is naturally something that's associated with joy. And the Rebbe says this is similar to the fact that we know that by the mitzvah of Simchas Yom Tov, which we need to have wine on Yom Tov, because ein simcha ela b'yayin. And when the Yid drinks the wine on Yom Tov, it's not chas v'sholem just for a taiva, just because he likes it and because he's tempted to have it, but he's doing it purely for the mitzvah. And therefore the simcha that the Yid has when he has the wine, it's not coming like by someone that's not a Yid because of the wine itself. The Yid is being happy because the mitzvah aspect of it, simcha shel mitzvah, and even more so, the drinking the wine itself is a mitzvah, because we know that Yidden are called a goy echad ba'aretz. Goy echad ba'aretz doesn't only mean that they are one nation on earth, but it means that even by the Yid, even from the perspective of his gashmi, is the keguf, even in matters of eretz, even in earthly things, they are a goy echad, they are a unique nation, they are a goy kodesh, they are a holy nation. From this we understand that even the simcha that a Yiddish guf feels when he's having wine, it's really not from the wine itself, it's really from the kedusha and the mitzvah of the wine. So nevertheless, even though, of course, the simcha is coming because of the mitzvah and the kedusha, nevertheless, since it's still connected with wine specifically, as we said, ein simcha ela b'yayin, and the simple reason in the Torah why we have wine is because naturally wine arouses simcha. So it's understood that the simcha mitzad the mitzvah in drinking the wine is still somewhat connected to the nature of the person, to the mitzias of the world, to the nature of the wine. That's all as far as wine is concerned. Whereas the simcha that's connected with pouring the water on the mizbeach, now water by nature is not something that brings joy. So this joy that happens by Nisuch HaMayim shows that the simcha of drawing the water has nothing to do with nature at all. It's coming purely because of Hashem's command, Usha'afta Mayim B'sasim, to draw water with joy. Says the Rebbe, this is the milah, this is the special quality, the special advantage of Nisuch HaMayim compared to Nisuch HaYayin. By Nisuch HaYayin, since the simcha is somewhat connected and related to nature, to creation, so therefore it's also going to be a limited simcha. It's within the limitations of the nature of creation. Whereas Nisuch HaMayim with a simcha is completely only because of Hashem's command, which is of course Ein Sof, Hashem is Ein Sof, so therefore the simcha that comes from that is also going to be beyond any limitations. Now that's as far as Nisuch HaMayim and Nisuch HaYayin in the time of the Beis HaMikdash. But the Rebbe says it's known and it's explained that by every single Yid there is the spiritual Mizbeach. And therefore it's understood that these two types of simcha, of Nisuch HaYayin and Nisuch HaMayim on the Mizbeach, also exist in our spiritual avodah by every single Yid. And the Rebbe explains, the simcha of Nisuch HaYayin would mean in a person's avodah the kind of simcha shel mitzvah which comes as a result of a hisbonenus, contemplating with seichel. That means when a yid thinks about the amazing opportunity he has, the amazing schus he has, the merit that the Eibishter gave him the opportunity to do a mitzvah, and the great inyanim that are being accomplished as a result of him doing the mitzvah, the fact that he's connected, becoming one with Hashem, that itself brings about a tremendous simcha, a tremendous joy. However, since this simcha is still connected with some sort of contemplation, meditation, with seichel, therefore, in this simcha, it's still somewhat felt, besides for the mitzvah itself, there's still room for still some feeling of the person who's doing the mitzvah. In other words, there's still some room for himself, similar to the simcha that happens through wine. In other words, it's still connected with a person's own nature. And since the simcha is connected with hasaga, there is some sort of understanding, logic intermingled with it. Therefore, the simcha is again going to be limited based on one's understanding. But then there's another type of simcha, which is the idea of nisuch hamayim. And this represents a person having simcha shel mitzvah, but in a way that's completely higher than understanding and meditation and logic. That is, when a person is in a mode of mesiras nefesh, when a person is in a mode that he's just completely giving himself over to the Eibishter. So he doesn't need any explanation in logic about the greatness of mitzvahs. Rather, as soon as he hears, as soon as he senses that this is something from Hashem, this is what Hashem commanded us, as we say in the bracha, Vitzivanu, that immediately this just brings him to the greatest joy. And this simcha is a true, real simcha without any limitations. Because this is a simcha that's reaching, it's touching the very essence of the soul that's higher than all of the revealed faculties, the normal faculties of the person. And this is also why it's regarding this sort of simcha, the nisuch hamayim, Chazal tell us, Misha loira simchas beis hashayeva, someone that didn't see the joy of simchas beis hashayeva, loira simcha b'yamav, never saw joy in his life, because this is the greatest, most unbelievable, unlimited simcha. Says the Rebbe, now we're also going to understand the general connection between simchas beis hashayeva and the Yom Tov of Sukkos. So first the Rebbe starts discussing the general simcha of Sukkos, what Sukkos is all about. Sukkos, as we know, the simcha of Sukkos is man simchaseinu, is coming from the avodah and all of the things that were accomplished on Rosh Hashanah, Aseres Yimei Tshuva, and specifically Yom Kippur. The Rebbe says it's known, Chassidus discusses this, that the idea of the schach of the sukkah, which is of course connected with, it comes from the Ananei HaKavod, because Hashem surrounded us with the clouds of glory when He took us out of Mitzrayim. So Chassidus explains that these Ananei HaKavod and the schach HaSukkah are all connected with the tshuva and the Anan HaKtoires, the cloud of the Ktoires, that happened on Yom Kippur. Now, what's the main avoid of Yom Kippur? What's really going on Yom Kippur? The avoid of Yom Kippur, which is called Achaz Bashana, the one unique day of the year, is coming from the Yechida, from the very deep essence of a person's soul. It's the Iskasher, is the bond of the Etzem HaNasham, of the essence of the Yid soul, with the essence of Hashem. As we say, Yechida liyachdach. So that's on Yom Kippur. On Sukkos, what's happening? That very Iskasher that we had with Hashem on Yom Kippur, the idea of Sukkos is that now it's supposed to become revealed to the extent that it's surrounding the Yid completely. It surrounds the Yid, like the Sukkah that surrounds the Yid, with everything that the Yid has. And that's expressed in the mitzvah of Sukkah, literally. Basukkah is teishvu shivas yamim. You're supposed to sit in the Sukkah, dwell in the Sukkah 7 days. You're supposed to be in the Sukkah like you live in your house the rest of the year. That means everything that you do in your house, whether it's eating and drinking and so on, are now being completely surrounded and encompassed by the mitzvah of Sukkah. In fact, there's something even greater in the mitzvah of Sukkah, which is makif, surrounding, over a talus, which is also surrounding the person. The talus surrounds the person, it's supposed to surround him, roishay v'ruba, his head and most of his body. But the Sukkah is not only surrounding the whole person, it's also surrounding all of the person's things, all the person's belongings. In other words, it's without any limitations at all. So that's the idea of Sukkah. We're taking the Etzem HaNeshama of Yechidah that we had on Yom Kippur, and now we're causing it to surround us completely, encompass the person completely. Says the Rebbe, this is why on Chag HaSukkos, we have this idea of Nisuch HaMayim and Simchas Beis HaShe'eva, which is the Simcha that goes also completely beyond rationale and logic. Because Sukkot specifically is this idea, this time, where the Simcha that's beyond all limitations is being brought about, is being aroused. Says the Rebbe, we know that the mitzvah of lulav, what's the content of mitzvah of lulav, is a mitzvah that's not just technically a separate mitzvah that has to be done in the time of Sukkot, on the 7 days of Sukkot, but rather it's very much connected with, and it comes in continuation to the mitzvah of Sukkot. The Rebbe says that this could also be understood from the din, that the best place to do the mitzvah of lulav is specifically done in the Sukkah. So what's the idea? Sukkah, we just said, encompasses the Yid with all of his things in a way that's surrounding him from the outside. In the language of Chassidus, that's called makif. Taking the daled minim. So the pasuk says, "Ulekachtem lochem." Take it to yourselves. What does it mean, lochem, to yourselves? That means you're taking the makif of the sukkah, that which surrounded you in the sukkah, but you're taking lochem, it should become yours, meaning it should go in the pnimius and internalize it. Take it personally. The Rebbe says this is also the reason why when we shake the daled minim, the way we take it, we first take it and put it close to our hearts. Because the idea is that we want that all of the inyanim of the sukkah, as we explained, all these ideas of makif, should be taken into the feelings of our heart, and then furthermore, libo polig l'choshayfen, the heart then distributes it to all the other limbs. In other words, in all of the faculties of the person, all the limbs, all the organs of the person, including even to his seichel of his head. And that's really the whole idea of Sukkot in the most perfect way, this gilui, the revelation of the makif in the most fullest and completest way, that we're taking this makif and also bringing it to the pnimius. That is, even though on the one hand we said that koiches pnimim, our inner faculties, our regular faculties, are much more limited, and that's why we say what's really needed is the avoid of Mesiras Nefesh, which goes beyond the limitations and beyond the limitations of logic. As mentioned before, that's the whole advantage of pouring the water versus pouring the wine. Nevertheless, the shleimus of avoida is that when the Mesiras Nefesh, the shleimus of the avoida of Mesiras Nefesh, is when that bittul and the Mesiras Nefesh permeates even his regular, ordinary koiches, his koiches pnimiyim, his logic, his emotions, so that they too should be on board with the Mesiras Nefesh. They too should dictate that there needs to be this Mesiras Nefesh. Why is the advantage when this koyach of Mesiras Nefesh also permeates the koiches pnimiyim? The Rebbe says 2 points. Number one, because only once it comes into the koiches pnimiyim, that means this idea of Mesiras Nefesh is being absorbed within the person in the pnimius, and therefore it's also going to last much longer. And number two, that really shows on the lack of limitation of the Mesiras Nefesh, of the bittul and the Mesiras Nefesh. That means it's not just stuck or relegated to one particular aspect of the person, but rather it comes and touches every single aspect of the Nefesh. There isn't one part of the Nefesh that it didn't reach and that it didn't permeate. Says the Rebbe, now we can understand the inner reason for the opinion that says that drawing of the water along with Simchas Beis HaShe'eva started only on the second night of Sukkos, which we said means it was after the Daled Minim. Just like the Shleimus, the perfect avoid of Mesiras Nefesh, we said, is accomplished when the Mesiras Nefesh attitude permeates all one's koiches pnimim, all of one's inner faculties as well. Says the Rebbe, certainly this is true when we come to the Simcha that needs to be as a result of the avodah. That is, number one, that the hisoidus of Simcha is specifically from something that you could feel in a very revealed way, something that you could relate to very, very much. That's when you have real Simcha. Number two, true Simcha is when it has no limitations. The shleimus of Simcha from something that's higher than your seichel is then going to be when it's going to remain not only in a makiv the way that it's going to remain beyond, but it's going to be specifically when it actually came down into the pnimius as well. In other words, this idea of lack of limitation. Says the Rebbe, so now we can understand why the simcha of drawing the water, which the idea of it is similar to what we said before, the simcha that's coming from the idea of a sukkah. In other words, the simcha of this makif, of this tremendous, unlimited, great level that's beyond everything. So when does it mainly start? It's going to start mainly the second night of Sukkos. After the avodah of L'kachtem Lachem B'yom HaRishon, after the avodah that you took, B'pnimius, you took the lulav, you brought it B'pnimius. Now, on the first day that we took that, the makiv of Sukkah, we took it lochem, that it should become part of you, that it should really penetrate you. So then on the second night of Sukkot, you could have the real usha'afta mayim b'sasoin. The real joy that's going beyond logic completely, this avoid of the Mesiras Nefesh that's higher than Seichel, but at the same time, that it's also permeating all of your koiches pnimiyim, and therefore arousing a real simcha and a revealed simcha. So we explained the opinion that says that the simcha starts the second night. Says the Rebbe, nevertheless, the halacha is that even on the first night of Sukkot, or the first day of Sukkot, there was also Nisuch HaMayim, and therefore before that the drawing of water and the Simchas Beis HaSheva. Because since it has to be Sha'afta Mayim B'Sasa, when you draw the water, it's supposed to be with joy, so obviously also that first drawing of water was with some form of Simcha, a permissible Simcha, of course, even though they couldn't use the music. So what's the idea of that? Why is there Simcha already on the first night? Because since even before we took the lulav, even before we have the lekachtem, so really already from the first moment of Sukkos, we already have the schach of the sukkah, we already have this makif idea of sukkah, even though we didn't bring it down to the pnimis, we didn't have the lulav yet, because that's the reason we already have simchas yom tiv on the first night of Sukkos. So therefore, even then we could already start experiencing the simchas beis hasheva, the simcha of drawing water, and this level of water, which is the idea of that which is beyond seichel. It's only that since the sukkah is still on the level of makiv, therefore that simcha is not in the most perfect way yet, and it's not so revealed. It's only going to be after the daled minim were taken. Ulakachtem lachem, once we brought the makif more b'panimiyas, so that's when we have the simcha beis hasheva, with the whole shturim full force, with the chalil, with the flute, and other clear shir, other musical instruments as well. So just to summarize, the Rebbe explained the opinion that says that the second night of Sukkot is when we started Simchas Beis Hashem, because it's coming dafka after the lulav. We brought the makif into a pnimi. And even according to the halacha, that we start the first night with simcha, it's still not going to be the same simcha as the second night. But the Rebbe also explained why in the time of the Beis HaMikdash they already had, according to the halacha, some form of simcha on the first night, because at least they do have already this level of makif, even though it wasn't brought down into a pnimius. The Rebbe now turns to Simchas Beis Hasheva nowadays. Says the Rebbe, now we can understand why now Bizman HaGolos, the minig Yisrael in many places is that we start Simchas Beis Hasheva already on the first night of Sukkot. Says the Rebbe, because the main idea that we spoke before about of bringing the makif should come into the pnimius, should really go into all of our inner koiches, was really mainly in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, when Elikus was shining in a very revealed way, and the pnimius, it really impacted the person in an internal way. The avodah at that time was mainly with the koiches pnimium, where a person served the Eibishter, mainly with his seichel and his midos, etc. Whereas in the time of Golus, where, as it says, we don't have godliness in a revealed way, we don't see signs and miracles in the same way as in the Beis HaMikdash. So these days, the beginning of our avodah is really not so much with the koiches pnimim. We don't have so much this idea of working with the koiches pnimim. The main avodah these days, and definitely the beginning of avodah, is mesiras nefesh, working with our koiches makifim, with these all-encompassing koiches. And simply, we have this avodah of al yevish mepnei hamaligim. That's what we have to deal with. In other words, not to be nispal, not to be embarrassed of those that laugh at us. That's our mesiras nefesh. Heavy as kanemer, we need to be as bold as a leopard, and as swift as an eagle, and as quick as a deer, and strong as a lion. In other words, we have to go more than seichel adam. We have to go beyond our seichel. And therefore, nowadays, what is not felt so much the special advantage of the second night of Sukkot, where we brought the makif also into a pnimius through the lekachtem lachem. We don't feel that advantage so much in the second night over the first night, because by us, really, our main avodah is really more with this mesiras nefesh attitude, with this koyach makif attitude. Of course, says the Rebbe, it's only because all matters of Torah are eternal, so therefore it's expressed nowadays as well that the second night, will have a greater Simchas Beis HaSheva and more joy within this joy itself, the second night, more than the first night. So we're going to have joy and even more than the first night. And furthermore, it's going to be such a joy as if the main union of Simchas Beis HaSheva is only starting the second night. In other words, of course, we still increase in joy on the second night much more than the first night. But nevertheless, we don't feel as much the special advantage of the second night, Bizman HaGolus. How the Rebbe concludes that the truth of the matter is, because of this itself, there's actually a certain advantage in Simchas Beis HaSheva compared to Simchas Beis HaSheva in the time of the Beis HaMikdash. Just like we explained generally regarding Mesiras Nefesh, that in the time of Golus, when we don't have so much this gilui of our inner koiches, of our regular koiches, Dafka now, the koyach of Mesiras Nefesh is more revealed than in the time of the Beis HaMikdash. That's what Dafka, because we don't have the same levels of intellect and insight as in the time of the Beis HaMikdash. So we have more the idea of Mesiras Nefesh. Says the Rebbe, the same thing is in regards to the simcha that comes as a result of the avodah, which is the simcha of Nisuch HaMayim. So really, in the time of Golus, it's even a greater simcha coming directly from the Etzem HaNefesh.